Hello and welcome to Business Tales, the podcast where we dive deep into the past, the present and the future of the business journey. I'm your host, Chris Simmons, and I'm thrilled to have you here as we explore the stories behind the successes, challenges and lessons. In each episode, we'll uncover the good, the bad and the invaluable experiences that shape our professional lives. So whether you're an entrepreneur, a seasoned executive, or just someone passionate about business, there's something here for everyone. Without any further ado, let's dive into the conversation. Hello everyone, meet Andrew Pullman, CEO, founder, HR expert and all-round people guru. He's the mastermind behind People Risk Solutions Limited, specialising in HR for financial and professional services, and as well CEO for PeopleClear Limited, a fintech company shaking up regulatory tech. That's, you're going to have to talk to me about this one in a second. I love disruptive-ness stuff. Basically, your expertise is in quite high demand. You've actually co-authored a book called Building an Outstanding Workforce, which is no real big deal, is it? Can't have been too bit easy.
Just throw.
And you're the former managing director at Dresdner Kleinwort, and I'm hoping I'm saying that right. Andrew's got a laser focus on the SMCR, Regulations of Financial Services. That one we'll hopefully touch on because that's a new acronym for me.
Okay.
You're a chartered fellow of the CIPD and chair the Senior HR City Breakfast Forum. My God, you get everywhere, mate. And when you're not busy with that, you're probably secretly plotting how to optimize people management with some spreadsheets, I'm sure. Welcome to the podcast.
Yes. Good morning. Hi. Good to see you again.
As with every guest, I take a little bio that you've written. I then pull your LinkedIn profile and then try and come up with something that sounds a little bit funny. But actually, it's really hard when you've got people who have done a lot and been in a lot of places and done quite a lot to actually make it not sound like, you've just popped up out of nowhere. You've done a lot already, Andrew.
Well, yeah, I've sort of, it's sort of an unconventional route, but I think, ending up an entrepreneur sort of probably means that that's what you have to do. And because actually one thing you didn't mention, which was way back, my first career, because I've had several, was actually in the army. So I started life at Sandhurst and at 18 and went to the army for 7 years. So that was where I sort of literally earned my spurs because I did wear spurs with my mess kit. And then came into the city after that. So
so why the army initially? Was it one of those? I've heard people who've said they've always wanted to be in it, and then I've heard other people going, I had no other choices in life.
No, it wasn't the French Foreign Legion, no. From the age of about 8 or 9 or 10 or something around there, I wanted, I thought I wanted to be a soldier. And I had a great mate of mine at school whose father was in the Royal Marines and he was going to go into the Royal Marines and he did. But I just wanted to go, I wanted to be a soldier. And when I went to secondary school, I ended up in the CCF, the Combined Cadet Force. I really enjoyed that, and then it was just natural that I was going to end up going to Sandhurst, and I got an army scholarship when I was at school, which meant there was support from the army for that, and got me a place at Sandhurst. Yeah, and it was just I signed up for life. I literally did sign a contract for life, but after a few years, decided that actually, my future was going to be pushing paper around. Because as a soldier, you're not always doing exciting things. You're often in headquarters, and I decided to escape and become a civilian.
So, talk to me a little bit about the path through the army, because Sandhurst is, for anyone listening who hasn't heard of it, it's pretty much the place to go if you want to learn how to be a top soldier, right?
Well, it's the officer training for the British Army. So it's the full name is the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst. So it's the UK equivalent of, you've probably heard of West Point in the US. And basically you go there for initially for basic sort of officer training to become a second lieutenant in the British Army. And then if you're staying on, well, in my day, and it's changed a bit now, but in my day, if you were signing up for a full-time career, not a short career, because you can actually have different types of term. You can do a short-term commission, a short service commission, or you could do a regular commission, which is what I did, which was for life. So I then stayed on for a further training, which was more academic, and then went off to join the Royal Artillery. So I became a young officer in the Royal Artillery and learned how to fire guns, large guns, down at Salisbury Plain, a place called Lark Hill. And then got sent to Germany for 3 years as a troop commander. This was back in the 80s, a long time ago. If you can imagine a time when there was a threat from Russia that it might come across the border. Oh, look, that hasn't really changed, has it?
No, it hasn't actually. So would you say that being in the army is where you kind of that core people aspect of your current career has come from?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I enjoy working with people, obviously. People fascinate me. What you also learn what I also learned from an early age was, what's leadership all about? Because you get taught leadership. The motto for Sandhurst is serve to lead. And this is something, most civilians don't really get, in that they think being an officer in the army is all about shouting orders and all that sort of stuff. It's not. It's actually all about getting people to do the stuff they need to do, but you have to persuade them. You have to earn their respect. You can't just, put your hat on and your pips on your shoulder and, bark orders. That's not how it works. And then you learn how people tick. And that was fascinating for me.
So what was it then that got you out of career one, should we say, into your next endeavor? Was there something that clicked when you were there that you went, this isn't for me anymore?
Well, I spent 3 years in Germany, which was sort of soldiering, with soldiers and guns and stuff. And it was boys with toys. It was fantastic, really great fun, as well as, serious, but it's a life.
Yeah.
And then I got posted to UK to train junior soldiers at a place called Junior Leaders Regiment, which was up in the Midlands in Bramcote. And it was while I was en route there, I got approached by a friend of mine who was finishing his job as ADC, aide de camp, for a general in the Western District in the UK, which was based up in Shrewsbury. And he contacted me. In those days, it was all snail mail. He wrote to me in Germany and said, I'm leaving the army. My general is looking for a new ADC, which is basically someone to work with him to help manage his office, etc. Would you be interested? And it means you'll be, you get promoted to captain. And I went, well, yeah, I'm your man. So I said, yes. Except my boss at the time, when I went to see him and say, by the way, I've just been approached about this job, but, after this. And he took one look at me and he said, no, you're totally unsuitable. No, it's totally unsuitable to be an ADC. I said, oh, okay. So I wrote back and said, I'm sorry, my boss tells me I'm unsuitable. So, but, the offer.
Did you use that word, those words?
Yeah. No, he said, no. He said, unsuitable. No. I wasn't polished enough, I think, or whatever. I don't know what I'm not, to this day, I don't quite know what he meant. But anyway, being young and innocent, the rest of it, I went back and said, well, sorry. And he wrote back to me and said, well, he might think that. As far as the general's concerned, you're on his shortlist. So I went back to England, landed at my new job, went to introduced myself to the commanding officer and said, oh, by the way, I've got an interview tomorrow with the general who commands Western District, which is part of where they were anyway. So it was, Anyway, long story short, I went for an interview, got the job. And 9 months later, I moved across as a young captain, sitting in a headquarters, looking down on a whole area of the UK that we were responsible for. And it was doing that job that I realized that going forward, if I was going to stay in the army, I would be spending a lot of my time going to a headquarters, then going to be a soldier again, and then back to a headquarters. And I thought, well, hang on, if I'm going to do that, I might as well do that as a civilian. And that's really what turned me. And it was probably one of the biggest decisions of my life, actually, having wanted to do it forever. And to then go, actually, I'm going to go and do something else, not knowing what that something else was.
Yeah, there's
no idea.
There's a huge kind of unknown, because all of your identity, to a certain degree, was tied into what you wanted to be when you were a kid and what you are at the time.
Yeah.
How did you reconcile the I really don't know what's going to come up out of this?
I look back on it, and I've looked back to it over the years, and I'm not sure. There was just a drive there which said, this isn't for you now. You need to make a change. And I suppose that's where some of the entrepreneurial spirit comes from. It's sort of, it's, somebody said to me once, I was doing a transaction and a financial transaction. They said, well, it's going to be a bit like jumping off the cliff. And I'm sure it'll be fine, but you don't quite know until you've jumped off the cliff and you land in the water.
Until you get to the bottom, yeah.
And yeah, exactly, which is a bit of a scary concept. But at the time, I just knew in my own mind that this is what I probably needed to do.
Yeah.
And I had to give a year's notice as well. It wasn't like you walk out the door. I mean, you give a year's notice. I got a year then to work.
It's hard to have your foot halfway out the door for an entire year and not be like itching to get going. How did you? I don't think I could have done that.
Yeah, well, in those days, I mean, you just got on with it, didn't you? You know, you just do it. I mean, I don't know, you just do it. But also because I didn't have anything to rush to specifically, that meant that, you know, I was looking around. So I applied for everything, all sorts of jobs, weird and wonderful jobs. I mean, one of them was working in a factory that makes silver-plated cutlery. They wanted a general manager / operations manager. I don't know why I applied for that. I mean, I applied for it, and then I met somebody who had left the military and was working in recruitment, and he was down in London. I went to see him. He was an ex-colonel, and he said, "Have you seen this advert?" And he handed me this piece of paper with an advert on it, and on the advert it said, you know, do you like making decisions? Do you like working under pressure? I thought, yes, tick, tick, tick.
Yeah.
What's it for? And it's to join a bank, and it's to join JP Morgan, the US bank.
All right.
To do sales or trading. And I thought, yeah, that sounds fun. So I'll apply for that. I ended up having several interviews, and eventually they offered me a job in sales.
You went from leadership to sales and then back to people again somewhere along the lines.
This is it. Yeah. So I was in sales.
You got an elastic brain, that's for sure.
Well, I don't know about that, but it was, you know, I didn't even know what product I was selling, to be honest. That was one of my questions. When the guy said to me, he was a Canadian guy, I remember him well, and he was the MD of this new business they'd set up. And it was around the time of Big Bang in '86. And they were hiring lots of graduates. I wasn't even a graduate, that's the other thing. I was going in under the graduate scheme. Because I'd gone to Sandhurst, it was sort of the equivalent. And it ended up hiring about 8 of us who were ex-military. And he said to me, I've got after your job, Andrew, as a trader. And I said, oh. And then he went, flick, flick, flick. No, as a salesman. I said, oh, okay, yeah. Selling gilts. I said, okay, good. Any questions? He said. I said, yeah, just one. What's a gilt?
Yeah.
And then he looked at me as if, is this guy for real? Is he taking the mickey, or is he actually asking the question? So he then in a roundabout way, tried to explain what a gilt was, which was fine. And I got a job anyway. I did that for, a couple of years. And got sent to New York for 3 months to do a mini MBA at the Morgan Finance program. So I got trained up, and but then after a couple of years, got clonked on the back of the head because they cut the operation in half, and they offered me a job in training. So this is where my career,
which makes this is the fork in the road, isn't it?
Well, this is it sort of, and it sort of made sense because I'd come out of the military where you spend 70% of your time training. You know, you're constantly training. And I thought reluctantly I'll give it a go. And I actually really enjoyed it. And I did it for about a year or so. And then they wanted me to move into personnel, as it was called in those days. And I was part of the function, but I was in the training bit. And I thought, no, I don't want to do that. But I had a business idea. And that's when I set up my first business. So I resigned and set up the first business.
Which business was that one?
This was called, it ended up being called, it started off being called Pullman Training. And it was a training business. But then I found there was another company called that. So I ended up calling it, I thought, I'm working for JP Morgan, there's NM Rothschild, there's SG Warburg. I'll call it AC Pullman.
Brilliant.
So it was AC Pullman Limited, and it was setting up as a training broker. So the concept I had was to have a database of suppliers of training and then go to banks and financial institutions, say, what training do you want? You pick from my list, and I get commission. Great idea, bad timing, because in the following year there was a recession and training got cut. So it literally lasted 1 year, and I made every mistake you could possibly make in terms of running a small business.
Sounds likely, given
Yes.
it was the
And
first one you'd done.
yeah, first one, I was cocky, arrogant, thought I could do it, and then got a call from my bank manager, very friendly bank manager in those days. Those are the days when you had a bank manager, somebody to
Yep,
talk to.
I,
And he rang me up.
I remember those days,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
only vaguely.
exactly. And he said, "Hi, Andrew, just wanted to let you know, have you read the insolvency laws recently?" And I went, "Oh, oops, cease trading."
That was a bit must have been a bit stressful though, because
It was.
like again, I had did a recording the other day with Christine, who I think you also know.
Yes, Christine
and
Nicholson, I know her very well, yeah.
yeah, and she said to me, a lot of your personality gets tied up in a business when you first start it, especially like early doors. And it's when things don't go so well, it's really hard to separate the you bit from the reality of the situation.
Yes.
And yes, like you say, you made a few mistakes, but also it was wrong timing to a large extent as well. Even with all of the right decisions and the timing being the key factor, it might still not have survived. But it's really hard to not let that knock you a little bit, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. And it is like, well, it's your baby. You've created this thing, and from scratch. I mean, again, that was created from a blank sheet of paper, but it was a good learning experience. I ended up walking away from that in reasonably good order. I looked around and there were businesses going down like 10 pins. And the bank manager said to me, he said, "Look, you've got debt, but you can carry on, and you're not driving around in a Porsche. You haven't pocketed lots of cash. So move forward," which I did, and decided one day I should do this again. So I then ended up working initially in training, and then eventually shifted across to HR, worked for a number of banks, and ended up at Dresdner Kleinwort, as you mentioned, the German investment bank. Previously, I'd been head of HR for the private bank, and which sat alongside, and then I got called in at short notice because there were lots of changes going on, and they desperately needed somebody to parachute into the financial markets business. So I parachuted in and had a great time as global head of HR for the paying capital markets. So it was all of the sales and trading people. So it's something I had done. So I'd been a salesman. So I understood what the job was about, and I'd been trained. So actually it made life a lot easier in HR because I could actually talk to them, person to person, rather than having to justify my existence, which a lot of HR people unfortunately have to spend their time doing. And
which would have made a difference.
Yeah, and that made a real difference, and had a really good time, and really had a good thing going. The guy running the business eventually became CEO of the bank, and I was his go-to guy, became deputy head of HR for the whole of the bank, and then he got fired.
Hopefully you weren't involved in firing him because of your role at the time.
The powers that be decided, Allianz owned Dresdner Bank at the time, and decided that they didn't want to go into investment banking, and they'd bring it all back home. So they sent over a management team from Germany, and I decided this wasn't for me anymore. This was 2006, and that's when I decided it's time to go, and this is the time to go and do my own thing again. So that's when I escaped, and on the 1st of September, which is 18 years ago, I set up People Risk Solutions as an HR consultancy.
Oh, wow. So hang on, you've just had your 18th birthday.
Yeah. When
Congratulations.
We're just about to do some marketing around that. So I'm now allowed out now.
I was going to say, did you take People Risk Solutions out for a bit?
Yeah. Well, we had a big celebration at the 10th anniversary. I think I'm going to do a big one at the 20th. I think the 18th is more of a milestone. So, and it's a virtual business anyway. So we don't have an office. We were virtual from day one because I decided one of the big mistakes I made with my first training business was to have lots of fixed costs. So I had an office which cost, I had a box room office with 2 desks, no windows, in the middle of the city, and it cost me £1,500 a month back in 1989.
Yeah, that's a lot.
That's a lot of money, and I built up lots of costs. So I decided this time around, virtual business, which of course meant when we went into lockdown, and everyone was sort of going virtual. And I said, well, I've been doing, my business has been virtual since 2006. And they looked at me and went, oh my God, you were visionary.
No, you just didn't want to have a big cost item.
Well, exactly. I was being practical, but actually it turned out I'm a visionary. I'm a guru. So there you go.
Yeah, stick it on your LinkedIn profile.
I should do, yes, guru. But no, it meant that when we got into hybrid working, we know something a bit about that. We've got lots of experience of it. And personally, I've got tons of experience of that, managing teams virtually and getting things done. So that's been helpful to sort of advise and help companies navigate their way through that.
That's awesome. And so People Risk Solutions has been running for 18 years, but you're also running PeopleClear.
Yes.
So I know a thing or two about running multiple things at the same time.
Yes.
And the strain that puts under you. The grey hairs you might be able to see on the camera shouldn't be here at my age. What's PeopleClear different to? How's PeopleClear different to People Risk, and why aren't they the same entity?
Yeah, right. Quite simple, really. So People Risk Solutions is an HR consultancy. We provide outsourced HR support, mainly to professional services and financial services firms, but not exclusively. So we work with, because actually people issues are the same in all industries. And we've worked with manufacturing, we've worked with charities, we work with all sorts of organizations. We help manage the people aspects. And we do a lot of stuff around things like investigations and grievances, the difficult end, the redundancies. But we also look at the growth end. We do some development, we do some coaching, etc. But it was doing all of that post the financial crisis that within the city, for banks, they brought in a new set of regulations called the Senior Management and Certification Regime, the SMCR you mentioned right at the beginning.
Yes. Okay. Now I know what that means.
Yeah. And the regulations were brought in to do two things. If you remember back when the financial crisis happened and the banks were given all this money, all our money given to the banks.
Yes.
And lots of senior bankers were standing there and being asked, well, why did you do this? Why did you do that? And the answer was, it wasn't my decision. It was a joint decision. It wasn't my responsibility.
Yeah.
So the government asked the regulators to look at that and come up with some new regulations to sort that out. And the aim was to sort two things out. One was to change the culture of financial services and make it better and more well behaved. But the other was around responsibility, making sure that people took responsibility for what they were responsible for. So they brought in these new regulations which basically said if you're a senior manager, you're at the top end, you're at the sort of the board level, etc. You have to sign a document that says these are my responsibilities and I'm personally liable. And if anything goes wrong in these areas, then I am the first person that puts his neck on the block.
Wow, I bet that was a popular change.
It did scare a few people because they suddenly had to take ownership for their responsibilities, which they had before. It's just they didn't exercise it in the same way. So that was the first thing. The second thing is underneath that, you've got what I call the marzipan layer, but it's basically all of the traders, the salespeople, the people who are dealing with clients, taking risks, running money. They now all have to be certified every year as being fit, proper, and competent by the company they work for. Because what happened before, when I was in sales, was I went to do an exam with the regulator, and once I passed the exam, I got a badge which says I can be a salesperson.
Yeah.
As long as I stayed in sales in different organizations for the rest of my career, that was it. No one,
even though things changed.
Even though things changed.
Wow. Okay.
I wouldn't need to do anything else apart from keep that badge. As long as I didn't do anything wrong, I could keep my badge. But no one checked, apart from appraisals and stuff. But nobody really checked whether you were fit, proper, and competent. So now the organizations have to check every year that everybody's fit, proper, and competent. You get a certificate for it. You also have to do it every time you hire somebody into one of those roles. Every time they change roles or take on more responsibility, they have to be recertified. So there's a whole process which mixes HR and compliance and risk and the aspects of running the organization. And initially it was for banks, and then it got extended out to all financial services who are regulated by the FCA or the PRA. And I looked at that, and we got involved in that. We got involved in training and also advisory on how to do it, because there was a large people element to this, because these are your people. These are your most important people. And what I thought was, I think there's an opportunity here, because running a consulting business, as you know, consulting generates cash, but it doesn't generate lots of value. Whereas RegTech is a valuable commodity, and
it's an asset that you can build, isn't it?
And it's something that you could build and ultimately potentially sell. So I decided, let's build some technology. Again, a little bit of a gamble. I'm not a technologist.
Yeah.
I thought, hey, I'm a user. Let's build some laser-focused technology that helps firms manage all of this stuff around SMCR. So you have to have evidence, for instance, to prove that people are fit, proper, and competent. Well, let's create a place where you can put all that evidence. You can load up, appraisals, training, details of, a letter from a client or an email saying what a great job you did on that transaction or whatever. You can load all that up, and then you can manage it. And you can manage it using technology rather than, and you used the word earlier, spreadsheets. Because spreadsheets aren't very reliable, because the human error is easy to, and you can't load documents up onto spreadsheets, and you can't track spreadsheets and do an audit trail. Basically, we created this thing. It needed to be a separate entity to People Risk Solutions, because I didn't want to mix it up. And so we called the business PeopleClear, and I decided to call the product PeopleClear SMCR. And so we started building around 2019, slowed up during COVID, obviously, because we were all virtual. And then as we came out of COVID, end of 2021, beginning of 2022, we did a soft launch and went out there with the product. And that's how I'm.
And it's picking up decent adoption, is it?
It's been a bit slow. It started a bit slow, and then I went for a grant. We went for a grant, Innovate UK. We got an Innovate UK Smart grant, which helped us to develop it further. So we had a sort of version 1, but there were things that we wanted to do and improve it. So we've been, for the last couple of years, we've been using Innovate UK to help with that. And we're just going through a bit of a reboot now. So we've got, if you like, PeopleClear 2.0, which is an improved version, and we're out there in the market banging the drum.
And so what the big boys, so to speak, forgive the vernacular, those are the people that you really want to pick this up, I guess, but also anyone in between that is regulated. Yeah,
I mean, to be honest, the big boys and the girls have built their own systems often. So they've adapted what they've got, or they've built their own systems. We're looking at the sweet spot for us is the sort of middle market. It's the sort of organizations with between 10 and 20 people, up to 1,000 probably, who or maybe more, who have got a load of people that they need to certify. It takes up lots of time and effort. It's fairly unsexy, but it's necessary. Has to happen. And you also have to demonstrate to the regulators that you're taking reasonable steps to make sure you're doing the right things. Well, just by taking on our system, you're able to demonstrate a reasonable step straight away, but also it's a lot more ordered and it takes much less time. So there's lots of good reasons to do it. So we're out there. But as you know, selling technology is very different to selling consulting.
Hugely, yes.
Yeah. And that's the learning curve that I have been on. And again, coming back to this concept of being an entrepreneur, it's all about picking yourself up, dusting yourself down, and learning from mistakes and bumps in the road, etc. So one of the things I hadn't put in place properly was a proper sales engine for the business. So that's what I've just been doing. I've just hired my first head of sales, and the whole thing is transformed in terms of how we do things, which is great.
And do you find it like when there's a lot on your plate with PeopleClear and a lot on your plate with People Risk, do you find it easy to dichotomize your context switching abilities between these businesses?
Well, first thing is I've got somebody who is my right-hand person for People Solutions, who heads up the HR practice there. So Sue, leads that for me / with me, and basically moves that forward without the need for lots of intervention from me. So that frees me up to focus on PeopleClear, which is my main focus. But it is a bit like people talk about juggling. The trouble with juggling is you can only juggle about 4 or 5 things. I talk about spinning plates, and it's about spinning plates. And you can spin a plate and it will run for quite a long time before you need to go give it another tweak. So for me, and again, this is a lesson I learned from my military training, which is leadership and running something is all about surrounding yourself with good people and surrounding yourself with people who can do what you can do, but, aren't quite there yet, but they also have their skill set. So it's using people around you with a lot of skills to help keep the show on the road. And I've got some really good people in my teams who help me to do that. And I can rely on them and trust them. And so I end up being more of a ringmaster and looking at the strategic side of things rather than getting buried in the weeds all the time.
Yeah, so you get to be the leader in the helicopter looking down at the battlefield, shall we say, to use a military way of looking at it. You're directing and you're leading because you trust the people on the ground who do the heavy lifting, but also quite a lot of the operational delivery of these things as well. Yes,
and so occasionally, quite often I land a helicopter and hop out and do something and then hop back in again.
Hello, it's me again.
I'm not like, if you've ever watched Blackadder, I'm not like General Melchett, who says, I'm right behind you, chaps, 40 miles behind you.
Yeah, exactly.
Although my son did post a picture once, which I've got alongside each other. There's a picture of me when I left the army. Just before I left the army, I had some photographs taken. And I grew a moustache in the army to make myself look older. And he posted a picture of me in the army next to a picture of General Melchett, saying,
"Brilliant,
which is which?"
I'm sure you, whilst you may have looked similar at the time, I'm sure that you wouldn't have been anywhere near as poor as leader as that.
Well, hopefully not.
What's on the horizon then? What's apart from People Risk and PeopleClear, where are you kind of looking in the future? What's in the cards for you? Are there 3 more careers left in you?
No. I suppose what I'm curating really is a portfolio career. And you hear the expression, what's a portfolio career? Well, for me, a portfolio career is where you are doing different things and keeping yourself busy and interested, doing different things. So for me, on the business front, obviously we've got People Solutions, which is now 18 and moving, continues on a, and we're doing some work around that to sort of raise the bar a bit on that. PeopleClear is a major focus because that's taking up a lot of my time and resources to get that properly up and running. I'm also obviously getting involved with the Company of Entrepreneurs, which obviously we're both in.
We are, yeah.
And I'm mentoring one of the organisations that Liz Bay, who runs Treasure which won the Easy Award this year. I'm spending this year mentoring her and her team, which is great fun, and it's really good to help young new businesses. And
you get a lot from mentorship, don't you? As you get older, should we say, in a nice way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so that's good. So I want to do more of that. I'm also heavily involved in the pro bono work from the other company that I'm a member of, Livery Company, which is the company of HR professionals. So I'm also in the HR professionals, which is another new livery, similar age to the entrepreneurs. And there I'm involved in the pro bono activities with charities, helping them as well. So for me, the way forward is to continue, and I've got a company that I'm NED for as well. Yeah. But it's to have a portfolio career is what I'm enjoying. It means I can do different things, and I can tweak and spend more or less time on different things. So for me, that's where I'm heading, I think.
I think that's a great way to head, because it's that you get the variety that you kind of crave, but also you get to do good and build something all at the same time. It's kind of, there's less risk to it as well, to a certain degree, because one thing could fail, but three things exist.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the constant tightrope of being pulled in different directions for different things and being careful with time that you give is essential.
Yeah.
It can be tough, because obviously, like this week, for example, you went away at the weekend, and now you've got the same expectations, accountabilities, and people relying on you, but just one less day to support them all.
Yes.
It can be tough like that. So one thing I like to ask everyone on the podcast is, what is the best advice you ever received, and how it's kind of applied to your entrepreneurial career?
Well, that's a good question. And I think the best advice I got was from one of my, in fact, a fellow entrepreneur, a guy called David Meller, who has now pretty much retired, but he's still a member of the company. And I got to know when I left Dresdner Kleinwort 18 years ago, and looking for some help to set up a new business. And he was the person that was put in touch with me. And he ended up becoming a good friend and also colleague and mentor. And at the point along the journey with the consulting business, I needed to decide what direction we're going in. And it was very much a lifestyle, but for several years it was a lifestyle business. And I had to make a decision. I reached a fork in the road. Do I continue as a lifestyle business, or do I do something more with it? And I sat down with him and we did a strategic review. And he really helped me to focus. And the really big advice that he gave me was I needed to spend more time on the business rather than in the business. So I needed to step back. And so instead of, when a piece of work came along, think, okay, how can I do this? Who's going to help me? The change of focus was, a piece of work comes along, who's going to do it? It's not going to be me. I'm going to oversee it, but somebody else is going to do it. So it was that real change which helped me to rationalize where I should focus my energies.
And I totally agree with that. And I've heard that myself. Someone's given me that advice in the past, and it was a bit of a watershed moment for me as well, to a degree, where you kind of realize that you can only get so far whilst you're in it. You have to focus on it in order to have something that's worthwhile in the long run, whether you want to sell it or whether you want to keep it or whether you want it to run and just pay the bills and whatever. It's more risky if you're in it than if you're working on it. And once you work that out, or once you give the veil gets pulled away, it can be quite a nice little epiphany. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today, Andrew. First of all, I had no idea that you were in the army, so now I need to go and look up my military acronyms for the next time we talk, just to sound like I sound.
Don't worry about that.
Thank you so much for coming on. It's been great to talk to you.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed it. Cheers, Chris.
And have a lovely day.
And you too.